Hey, what's going on, traders? Happy Friday. Thank you guys so much for tuning back into the channel. As usual, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys know exactly how my trading went today, so let's get right into today's recap. And as you guys can see from the screen, unfortunately today was my first red day trading of the week, right? I took about a $29 loss on TQQQ, right? And I made about an $8 profit on SQQQ. So overall I was down about $20 or $21 on the day. So although it was my first red day of the week, I'm just really grateful that I was able to manage risk today. But I'm gonna go ahead and break down exactly what I thought, or where it went wrong for me, and how I could probably improve heading into next week. So these were all my filled orders. You guys can see, right? Started trading same time as usual. Market opened 6:30, and I didn't stop trading today until 8:20, right? So I was trading for a decent amount of time today, right? Almost 2 hours. And so in terms of what I saw going on, right, the Nasdaq was indicating signs of a sell-off all during the pre-market session, right? It was making these lower highs and lower lows, right? It was just constantly getting rejected by the EMA, right? As you guys can see, it formed these lower highs and lower lows, right? Where it would push down, right, go lower than it did before, right? And then it try to find a support, but ultimately it wouldn't be able to hold and would continue to sell off pretty aggressively, right? And so, heading into market open is right around this area over here, right, where you see the increase in volume bars. And so, given this thing was super, bearish all during the pre-market session, I thought that there was a good chance that we can continue that, but obviously I don't know, exactly what's going to end up happening. So, as soon as market open, we saw, I believe, a quick spike, and so I bought into TQQQ, right? Or ultimately, at the start, actually, my apologies, I got into SQQQ because I saw this thing fall, but as it popped, right, I'd have to cut loss. My loss is there, and so what you guys will notice is that this thing was trading all over the place, right? So this thing had these huge candlesticks that would push up, then back down, right, all within a short period of time. So this was definitely messing me up, heading into during these first few minutes of market open. I was already taking losses, right? Although they were small losses, they were starting to add up a bit, but I knew there was a report coming out at 6:45, so that was one of the reasons why I thought the market was very choppy the way it was, right? And so, as you guys can tell, from the screen on Friday, which is today, right, there was a report at 9:45 a.m. Eastern time, which was the Chicago PMI. And so what exactly is that if you don't know? The Chicago Purchasing Managers Index determines the economic health of the manufacturing sector in Chicago region. It says a reading above 50 indicates expansion of the manufacturing sector, a reading below indicates contraction. But what was actually reported? So prior was a 37.2, right, on the Chicago PMI. What was expected was a 40. We actually got a 44.9, right? And so the same thing I was telling you guys, right, with the comments saying of bad news is good news and good news is bad news. Well, if we were expecting this thing to go up, right, from 37.2 to 40, and it went up a lot more than expected, right, up to 44.9, that's a huge increase, right? And so this is, although this is technically good news, right, that it had a higher PMI, we are in a bear market, right? So right now, good news is bad news. And so what you guys will notice if we look at the charts, at 6:45, what ended up happening when the report, right, released, the Nasdaq future started to sell off, right? And so what you guys will notice is it started to sell off pretty aggressively, and it ultimately ended up finding a support around this area. If I'm not mistaken, it was very choppy around this area, and I think I put myself in about I would say like $40 hole, and ultimately on this way down, I was able to make it back, right, on these 3 candlesticks down here, getting into SQQQ. But ultimately found a support, ended up bouncing, and as you guys can see, right, it ended up just pretty much changing direction on the day. So we ended up breaking above the EMA, right, selling off, then ultimately forming this higher high and then a higher low, right, and ultimately we ended up pushing up again. And so the constant changes in direction was really tricky with me today, right? That's where I kept giving back lots of the profit that I was making on some trades, right, where there were clear candlesticks, but then ultimately it'd get choppy and I would end up, giving back some of the profit or losses, actually, I should say, because I was down money majority of the day today. And so as this thing would sell off, I would think, okay, well, this thing was selling off all day, right? And so as this thing peaked out and started to sell off, I thought we were gonna actually continue to sell off, but nope, we actually, broke above the EMA, which, ultimately obviously could have happened. It could have gone one of two ways. It could have just, started to continue selling off or form this higher low, so I definitely was prepared for that, cut my losses. And so, that's pretty much what ended up happening for me all day. I just continuously was getting, stopped out of my trades in these choppy territories. And I think around, by the time it was around 7:30 to 8 o'clock, I was actually down about 50 to 60 on the day. So I was digging myself in a bit of a hole. But ultimately, once I saw this thing start to want to run again here, that's when I decided to get into TQQQ and was able to make some back, right? But then ultimately what ended up happening, I gave some back as this thing started to change direction. And right around this area, I believe because of me riding this thing up, I actually may have entered the green. And what ended up happening was this thing pulled on back, and I told myself that I was going to take a trade here, and this was going to be, a more of a riskier trade, but I honestly had other stuff to do in the morning, so I was going to set my stop loss to be not as tight, right? And so as this thing pulled on back, I got into TQQQ, right? With the goal of pretty much trying to ride this thing, to form a higher high, but that's not what ended up happening. This thing started to push up, and I actually ended up adding some more around this area. And as this thing started to fall, I had to cut it. And, as this thing started to sell off and, trade between the middle and bottom VWAP, I definitely was more cautious of that. But I ultimately decided that although, every single time it would fall to around these areas, I did notice some form of support, as you guys will see, right? We saw some form of bounces here. So although it was very choppy today, I felt that this thing was pulling on back and could have a potential nice run. I didn't know how good it could be, right? Ultimately, but I thought that there could be some form of support right around this area. Obviously more of a risky trade, but, given the choppiness of today, it wouldn't have been in my best interest to continue trading, but that's what I ended up doing today, right? So there were lessons learned. And so, as you guys can see, this thing ended up falling. And I think I bought more TQQQ right around this area, thinking this thing was going to reverse around here. And that wasn't the case. This thing actually ended up selling off. And so I cut my trade there and decided to walk away for the day. So I went from green to red, unfortunately, after this last trade. But that's, I decided to just walk away there. And, although it was a $20 loss, it's not that big of a deal compared to the green days I've had. And that's ultimately, how you want to have it. And so on a choppy day like today, just walking away with a small loss was a big win for me in my eyes. And so, this thing did ultimately start to pick up, so that sucked to see, but it eventually did end up selling off a lot. And what ended up happening close to the last power hour of the market, as you guys can see, this thing absolutely went ballistic, right? Literally the last hour, so right around 12 o'clock, this thing just started, uptrending completely, broke above the middle VWAP, top VWAP, and was continuously forming these higher highs, higher lows, and riding the EMA line as a support, right? So that was pretty cool to see. I wasn't even looking, at the charts at the time this was happening, but it would have been very nice to be at my computer to be able to trade this, but, I obviously didn't know this was going to happen. It was obviously very nice to see because of the fact that, right, it is the last trading day of the year. And so 2022 is coming to a close. And obviously lots of stocks are down long term, right? And I'm still very excited heading into 2023 because I think that even if we do end up being bearish the first half of the year or even the full year, long term, big picture in the next 2, 3, or 4 years, I think that's where a lot of money can be made in terms of, holding on to swing trades or even day trading, right? Getting into stuff like TQQQ on days where the Nasdaq's bullish could be awesome to see. But I'm just very excited for the next year, and I hope you guys all are too. But that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about today. I want to thank you guys again for tuning back in, and I hope you guys really did all have an amazing year this year and are all looking forward to 2023. But that's pretty much everything. I hope you guys all enjoy your weekend and your New Year's, and I will see you guys on Monday. Well, Monday I believe market might be closed. I have to double check on that, so it might be Tuesday, but Anyways, enjoy your weekend. Thank you guys so much.